Alright, welcome back. Time to get our feet wet. In this video, we'll be looking at the basics of Git and working with it locally. That is, imagine yourself not working in a team, so there's no need to collaborate. Yet. We'll look at that in the next video. So remember this workflow? It works in 3 stages. Initialization, then we write some code, followed by staging, and finally committing that change. We'll develop a simple to-do application in React, but you can of course use any code really. This exercise, by the way, happens to be one of the most common React front-end live coding questions. So do check out the link to another video that I did on that for reference, should you be preparing for a front-end interview. It should show up on the top right. If not, it will most definitely be in the description. Alright, without further ado, let's get started. Along this video, we'll be creating a task application using the React.js library. We'll be using the create React app package to spin up a boilerplate, on top of which we will be building our task application. The package will create a folder and set up all configuration and component template files for us. So to begin with, we'll go ahead and do npx create React app and the name of the app that we want to set it to. We'll call it task app. Hit enter. Looks like I do not have the package installed, so I'll go ahead and do npm install global create React app. And then try the same command again. Hit enter and let the package do its thing. Also, for the context of this video, we want to focus more on learning Git. So if you're not familiar with React, don't worry about it for now. You just want to focus on the Git part of it. We'll cd into the folder that has just been created, which is task app. Now notice that the create React app package initializes Git locally for us. So we will find a git ignore file and also these Git configuration files, which are generated on initializing Git locally. But for the case where it is not initialized, what we want to do would be git init. Now, since it was already initialized, it would reinitialize the existing Git repository, which is our current working project, the working directory in Git terms. And this is the first step in the Git workflow. Now that we have our template spun up, let's run it and make sure it works. So we'll do npm start. It'll take a second, run the development server, and we'll see the live view in a minute. Right, here we go. Okay, looks like it's running. So far so good. We'll keep the local development server running. So we'll go ahead and open a new tab in the command prompt, navigate to our working folder, and we'll open up an IDE of our choice. So the editor that I prefer to use is Visual Studio Code. So I'll go ahead and open that. And here is the template code that create React app generates for us. Let's do a brief recap before the next step. We know now that Git is a version control software, which means we can save versions of our code along the development of a project over time. So we should be able to see that progress, right? Git allows us to do that. Imagine marking checkpoints along a course. These are our commits. And as a side note, I should also mention how releases are different. From time to time, there are software release versions created which we may think of as more important milestones. The absolute basic example would be the different OS versions you might have heard of, because that's software too, right? And sometimes these versions are given names. Anyway, so Git allows us to view the checkpoints we have saved. How do we view that? Let's go back to our terminal and do git status. Keep in mind, we will only be able to do this when a repo is initialized already, with Git that is. Now Git tells us that there is nothing to commit and the working tree is clean because the current branch that we are on, which by the way we could do git branch to find out which branch we're on. So locally the branch that it is initialized with is called master, and there is no code on the master branch, the current tree, which has to be saved. So let's go ahead and do our first change to the code and get rid of this here. Just say hello world. Save it. Let's go back to the terminal and try to do the same thing again. Let's do git status. And now it knows that we have modified this file and it will tell you that this has not yet been staged. So along our workflow, we could check the status of our current working tree. This is particularly helpful when you are working with multiple workspaces maybe, or doing a lot of changes together and you want to track which files are modified, staged, deleted, and such. Okay, now we'll go ahead and start building our application. Since the development server is already running, let's bring it here. We will paste through the code part here. Again, I did a whole video on this exercise. It should be linked in this video. Now, for a basic to-do app, we need 3 constructs: an input box for text, a button to save it, and a list that would show these tasks. Let's begin by listing them down. And since it's a live development server, once we save it, it should reflect on the screen. All right, there we go. Let's start by adding the input and the button fields. So let's do input, type text, we'll add a placeholder, call it enter task. And I'll close this up. Same thing for a button. I'm just using the HTML tags here since JSX supports it, and I don't want to go through the trouble of importing anything. Alright, let's save that. We should see our input box and the button on the screen. Alright, there we have it. Let's zoom this a little bit here. We might as well add some padding to this div here, just to bring it a little to the lower end of the screen. Okay, not too shabby. And for the list to begin with, it can be empty, but let's just start with some fake data so that we'll have something to display on the screen. If you're wondering where I got this data from, this is from the JSON placeholder, which is a fake REST API. We'll just use that. We've named it original data. We'll map through that. And let's just print out the title for now. So it'll be task dot. Actually, let's just call this to do title. And we also need to parse this as JSX, so we'll use. So we gotta do that. And when we save it, should be able to see the list. Say that we now want to make a mark on our work so far. We would want to stage these files from our working directory. Now, this is the second step in the Git workflow. VS Code gives us the option to view the source control through this tab here. So we'll be taking a look at these files through VS Code as well as the command line for confidence and better understanding. So this number here represents the number of pending changes in the current directory. So we have made changes to 2 files, which is why it shows 2 pending changes. Since these files have already been tracked by Git, it knows that these 2 files have been modified, which this M here indicates, by the way, but not yet committed. So what we need to do next is to stage these 2 files, so we will be able to eventually commit it. The option to do that through Visual Studio Code would be here, this little plus sign, which says stage all changes. Now we want to stage both these files, so we can do this and it would be staged, but we want to do it through the command line also. So let's unstage these changes. Let's do git status again, just to see how many files are being modified. That's correct. Those are the exact 2 files that we saw on Visual Studio Code as well. Now I want to stage both of these files, so we'll do git add, and if it was one single file, we could have just typed the file name. Since we want to do more than one file and all of the ones which are modified, we'll do git add period. Hit enter. We can ignore the warnings for now. Let's do a git status again. Now the color code shows that these 2 files have been staged. Now if you have by mistake staged a file that you do not want to stage, you would want to do a git reset head, and then it would unstage all the files. Or if you want to specify a particular file, you will go ahead and type in the file name here, right? So if you do a git status again, it'll show those 2 files in red again, right? There we go. But we do actually want to stage them, so let's do git add dot. Now we know that these are staged. For the third step, we would do a git commit. M stands for message, so we'll say basic components add. This can be whatever you want. Now we have followed the entire Git workflow from step 1 initialization, step 2 staging, and step 3 committing. And we've also seen a few other commands along the way. This concludes the basic commands that you should know while working with Git and working alone especially. While working with a team, there are a few more challenges which you might need to tackle. So we'll take a look at that in the next video. But for this one, let's finish our app and look at all the commits that we will be doing along the way. Okay, back to the code. What you want to do next is to get this to work. Right now, if I type in something and try to save it, that's going to happen. So we would need an on-click handler on this particular button. So let's go ahead and define that. Let's call it add to do. We'll have to create a function, const add to do, and we would want to add to the existing list here. To do that, we would also need to specify a local state. So we'll use the useState hook. Let's call it data and set data, and we'll initialize this with original data because that's what we want to be displaying at the start. And we'll have to use this data here instead. Now on clicking this, what you want to do is grab the text in this text box and append that text to this list here in this format. So we would also use another use ref hook. Let's call it input ref, use ref. Let's start with null. These hooks should automatically be imported. Yeah. We want to place this reference on the input box. So we'll do ref equals input ref. Now, what this on-click handler will do is it will update the state by set data. And what we want to do is begin with copying all the elements in data already and add another to-do element in that array. So just copy all of this here. And what we want to do is change the title and say input ref dot current dot value. Alright, that should, okay, it says set data is not defined. Oh, that's my bad. We should be putting this inside our component. Save it. Now let's test it out. Test it out. Click save, and there we have it. So it gets added to the list. Also, we would want to delete it. So similarly, we'll have another function called const delete to do. Sorry guys, I'm pacing through this video a little bit since I wanted to keep it under 15 minutes. I don't know if I'll be able to. This delete to do needs to go on some sort of button, right? So in the list, we will be appending a little cross mark. So let's just use the alphabet X to do that. We'll put another on-click handler here, and we want to call delete to do as soon as this button is clicked, and we'll be passing something. So we might as well pass the title for this handler to check which to do needs to be deleted. I'll just call it task here. Let's go ahead and create a filtered list because right now we'll just be mocking the delete functionality. And let's do data.filter, and what we don't want would be the ones that would have the title that's been passed in. And we will be updating the state with the new filtered list that we just got. All right, I think that is the entire thing. To make it a little more distinct, let's just add a color to it. Let's just say red. Okay, there we have it. Let's just again save it, and when you click that little X mark, it will be filtered out. We have our entire application, at least it's functional on the UI side. Obviously, you would be able to make a lot of enhancements to this, such as clearing out this input text box as soon as we click save, CSS improvements, integrations with a database, a backend. There's no limit really. But let's get back to Git. Go back to the terminal, and we'll do a git status again. The only file that we modified is the app.js, so it will say modified. If you create a new file, it will say untracked, and you'll go ahead and stage it, after which Git will begin to track it, and you can make progress from there. We know the changes that we made are not staged now, so we'll do git add src app.js. Now you could also do a dot here since there is only one file to stage, but just for the sake of variation, I type the whole thing. Let's do another git status. We know that it is staged now. We could also go back to VS Code. You'll see that one file here and it will say that it is staged. Through VS Code, if you want to commit it, you could do it from here, or it also allows you to do it here by entering a message and then just hitting this button. But I recommend sticking to the command line as much as possible because it's a lot more faster. We'll do git commit message task app functional checkpoint. Again, this can be whatever you want. We know that we have made 2 commits along the way. Now we understand the Git workflow. We initialize the repository, then we stage the code changes that we make, and finally commit it to our working branch. This is all local right now. To view all the commits, we can do git log with a flag, one line, and we see the 2 commits that we made, these 2, and the first commit was actually made by the create React app. This here is the commit hash, which you can use to jump to that particular commit as well. And if you do it without the one line flag, it will show you a detailed history of all the commits. Alright, if you understand what we did so far, you have a basic understanding of Git. Although there are a few concepts that is good to have before working in a team. We'll look at that in the next video. And thanks for watching this one.